Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Krzysiek, and today I want to talk a little bit about XState or XState. It depends how you're gonna call it, and especially the autocomplete done with this library, and also what went good, what went wrong, what can be like improved. And this is really a little small case study of my side project. You can find me at krzysztofżuraw.com. This is my blog. I post somewhere regularly, but I have a newsletter too. So if you want to join, you are welcome. Anyway, let's get started. Yeah, the first idea is why this topic, and the first one is the first answer is autocomplete. We have recently, because I'm working in Ingrid, this is like a company who is doing a lot of things in the checkouts, and we decided that we gonna push with some autocomplete for our users. And I was given a task to do a proof of concept of this autocomplete. And at first, I thought that maybe we're gonna use a downshift library for that. But then this new idea of XState came out, and I was thinking maybe it would be a nice idea to test it, those both solutions, like downshift and XState. And I don't have a time to do it to work with the XState, so I decided to do some kind of a I decided to do it with as a side project in my own time. And yeah, so that is why I built some basic XState autocomplete. I tried different patterns with this XState, and this is my talk with my thoughts about this library and how it can be used to for you as a developer, for a better developer experience, basically. And yeah, the target audience is that basically it is not introduction to the state machine. So I assume that you know a little bit about the state machine. I won't here be implementing state machine at all. I will be implementing the state machine in XState, but I won't be doing from the scratch. So we're gonna use the existing library for that. And I also, if you know a little bit about state machines, but you want to, or this is also for you if you want to see XState in action. And this is also for you if you know a bit of XState and you want to learn more about this. So how does it look like? You can follow this link and see in action. Let me load this page. As you can see here, it's a simple autocomplete. I type some characters, I can select result, and results is displayed on the map, basically. And second. Yes, and where's the code? The code is on the GitHub. This is also, so you can go to kzurav.dev xstate gh, and you can see here there's a whole repository with this code, so you can see on your time, play with it. You can also give a star. And yes, let's go with the code type. So I want to start with the because in this XState I have two machines. I will start with the second one because I think it is easier, and we can gradually work towards a more complicated machine. And as you can see here, this is a graph of how this state machine is working. You can also see this graph in XState visualizer. As you can see here, we have a definition of our state machine, and this is really handy graph that you can print for yourself or for whatever you are gonna talk with about how this state machine is working, what are the different states. As you can see here, we have only two states, the idle and the selected. And what is happening when you are switching between those two states. And here it's also a loop, so I mean it's when it's in selected, it will be always in selected state. Okay, I think we can move to code. And as you can see here in my editor, we have really nice code, and this was also what I really like about the state machines and also XState, that I can basically encapsulate all this logic of, in this case, I will be talking about a selected point machine. This all logic about selecting the points from the map inside one state machine, and that's all. Basically, I'm using use machine hook. I give the selected point machine to it, and I got a current state of this state machine, and I also can send an event. And the event is simple. So when the user clicks on a list item, I send a selected event with the center coordinates from the result that I get from Mapbox. Because under the hood, this side project is using Mapbox and also Tailwind, but this is another topic. So how does this selected point machine look like? I go to definition, and as you can see here, this is the definition of the selected point machine. The machine comes from XState. I can give it ID, so it's properly displayed on the graph. Here I have a context. Context is something like a state, internal state that, well, maybe not internal, but maybe a state of the state machines. So I'm using it to basically keep the center of the center of the point when the user clicks, and this is then accessed in the map. So map is rendered based on the center and also properly positioned there. And I have here definition of the initial state. So this is one of the requirements when you are creating a state machine, that you have to have initial state for that. And here I have a definition of the states. I have two states, as I mentioned before. I have an idle state and I have a selected state. And here I have a transition between them. So I'm saying to XState when the selected event is sent. So that when the user basically clicks the select button, as it displayed here. So on this send event to point machine and the proper event name, so like selected, I at the first because we are starting in initial state. So when the state machine gets the selected event, then I telling state machine, okay, this is the target, so you have to move to the selected state, and you also have to do an action. And the actions is this concept that you can basically change the context based on transition. So you can say, in this case, that when I will be traveling from idle to selected state, I also want a state machine to change its context. And in this case, I'm using assign function. And as you can see from the documentation, it's update the context of the machine. And it takes two arguments, the context itself and also the event. So and it has to return the, in this case, when I'm using assign function, has to return a new value of this for the center. So I get, because I'm sending in send event to point machine, I'm sending a selected event with additional value as is here as a center, I assigned this this value from the action what is sent here. And the same idea applies to selected machine. When I'm starting from the idle, then I'm on the selected, and I also then send another event with the selected. I'm not going back to the idle state. I'm still in this endless loop of the selecting different points from the list and depending on the map. So this is all doing almost the same, and I think the same as the first state. And yes, I also added TypeScript types because I really like TypeScript, and when it's properly typed, it's even better. And as you can see here, this machine can take two generics. The one is used to describe context of the machine, and this, as you can see here in this case, is the beginning is a null, and then is only read-only tuple of two numbers. And also I can type properly events that this machine can take. And in this case, it's only one event. And you will see in the next example that can be multiple one used with union type. But for this particular case, I have only one type, means selected, and also with the center. It's what I also really like, besides this encapsulation of the logic inside this state machine, is that I can then go and also do some testing with that. And how does it look like? Let's move to this test. And I have this is like test taken from the documentation, and this is more of I would say integration test for the XState. So what I'm doing here is I'm telling that to XState, please interpret the selected point machine, and when the transition between those states is selected, I want to do some asserts. So basically, when there is a standard I want to test, then I'm telling then the jest is basically expecting that when I send, because how it's working, I send the event to the selected point service, because service is named service because it's a point, it's a machine that is interpreted. So that is why a service, and I can send some events to that, and I'm sending the selected event with the proper center, and then I expecting that the center of this. So I'm expecting that the context is updated and is equal 42. And in the end, I have to start the machine, because without starting that, it won't work. Yeah, I think that's it for the first element. For the first machine. Let's go back to the second one. So the second one is a little bit more advanced, and if you can go to the visualizer, as you can see here, this is the main autocomplete machine. So the main logic here is encapsulated in this machine. And what is the idea behind this machine is that when the user starts typing, I'm creating a new subject in RxJS, and I'm passing the values to the subject. And when the subject, after the, I think debounce or after because I'm also taking this stream of keystrokes, and I also debouncing it, making sure that it has at least 2 characters. And when the user stops typing, then I send this query that the user typed to Mapbox Go coding service, and then I get the result and present to the user, and user can select those points from the result. And let me move, and how it's used. As you can see here, this is also really nice. I like when in the XState that whole logic is in autocomplete machine, and I have only one way of communicating with this machine. I send only one event with the keystroke, and I also sending what is the current query value. So I'm getting the current target from the value, and I'm not having any debounce here. So everything is in the machine. So this is constantly firing this on-chain event. And how does it look like? Let's move a little bit to the top. I have an autocomplete machine as before. I have ID, I have an initial state, and here I have a slightly different context, because here I'm keeping the results. So there are results from the Mapbox geocoding service, and will be filled in here. And I have a query subject. So the query subject is RxJS thing. I'm doing a new behavior subject as a beginning with the empty string. So what is the difference between subject and observable? Because maybe you can also use, if you want, observable for that. And in essence is that when you subscribe to observable multiple times, there will be different values because the different strings. But when you subscribe to the subject, you get the same value basically. And that's why it's recommended to use subject for the special needs of autocomplete. Okay, so how the states look like. So at the beginning, I have a idle state, and when the first keystroke event is being sent, I'm moving to the started typing state. And here I have a 2 events. So I have a keystroke. So let's say user start typing, I set a keystroke, I move to started typing, and then I fill my query subject with the query from the user. So I'm pushing the values to the query. And also, and here, as you can see here, I'm invoking something. So this is a way to know, because in the XState you can invoke different, you can invoke a few things. You can invoke RxJS, and I think you can also invoke promises, other stuff. But here I'm using only promises and RxJS. And what I'm doing here, I'm invoking debounce keystrokes, which is basically RxJS piping. So I'm debouncing the stream, I'm filtering for the value greater than 2, so at least 2 keystrokes. And then, and this is also really nice, I map the stream to return the event that then will be then will be consumed by state machine. So this is also really nice that I can return from the invoked service some data that then will be interpreted by state machine. And you may see why do I need this generic here? And I did it because sometimes I misspell some words, and it turns out that at the beginning I forgot one P and everything broke on when I first deployed it, and it was nightmare to do it. So I decided, okay, let's type it properly. So I will be shouted at me. So when something is wrong. But going back to the invoke function. So here I'm invoking this debounce keystroke, which is itself under the hood piping of the stream. So then this debounce keystrokes is returning the stop event when the user is after the 300 milliseconds, and when the value is greater than 2. This is the stream is returning the proper event in this case stopped, and then I move to the stop typing state. And what is happening here? This is another syntax for evoking, but right now I'm invoking a promise-based service, and the idea here is I think it's needed for XState to properly serialize this. And here I'm giving the source. The source is the name of the service that will be then executed. As you can see here, I can create my services. Why is it done this way? I will tell you when we come to the testing phase. And what is happening here? I have two properties. I have an undone or error. You may guess that those will be executed when the promise is resolved with a success or rejected. And when this resolved with a success, I transition to the loaded state. And also on the keystroke, I'm having a full loop to going back to the idle state. With the on error, I don't yet implement it on handling errors, so it's something that can be improved. And going back to this geocode query, so as you can see here, I have a fetch geocoding service, and it's taking two things. They're taking a context and the geocoding client. The context is the same context that we have here, so it's taking results and query subject. And geocoding client, this is the way of initializing Mapbox client. So how does it look like? As you can see here, I have this is the code from the Mapbox. Basically, so I'm taking a geocoding service. I'm doing forward geocode on that. I'm taking the query from the context, current value of the query subject, and then this is the mode for the Mapbox, some configuration things for Mapbox. Then I send the request to the Mapbox, and then I get a response, which I'm then transforming. This is just for transformation normalization of data. So I know that it is properly displayed. As you can see, response is a feature that I can map, loop through, and I can display it to the user. And yeah, I think that's all. What is this machine doing? And maybe we can move to the testing phase. And yes, the testing phase is we have a test case here, and this autocomplete machine with config. Why is that? Because thanks to having services defined in this way, I can do a dependency injection, and then I can say in the testing or in the test that please, instead of using proper implementation of fetch go coding service, I can mock this fetch go coding service. As you can see here, I'm doing that. So what I'm doing, I'm returning a mocked response, which is typed as geocode results. So I have all those data presented, mocked, and sent to the service and then to the machine itself. And this is also what I'm doing here is almost the same as I did with the other with the first test. So I interpret the autocomplete state machine when the transition on the transition phases when the state match is loaded. So this is the end of the my this is the end of transition of the my state machine. I expect that the results will be there, and I also type some keystrokes to the state machine. Yeah, and I think that's all for the code and this the autocomplete machine. Let's move it to next thing, and a little bit summary about what was good, what can be improved in this, or also with the XState. What I really like about this approach and this side project that I learned is that I like the logic is in one place, so I can then switch to, from React to Vue or add or even move without the framework, and the logic is still there. So it's also, this is really nice that I have a logic in different place than my display logic, so to speak, or my styles and components. And what went bad or can be improved is that with the XState is basically no clear documentation. What I mean by that is, let's say you have a machine and you want to do proper machine, you go to the documentation of XState, and it turns out that you can define your states in a few different ways. You can define it with the on and the name of the event, with the target. You can do it without the target, and there are different ways to do the same, and it can be a little bit confusing, especially for the newcomers who comes to this library. So they want to know exactly how to do it, especially when the one example is written in this way, and another example is written without the target at all. And then you are seeing that and you are thinking, why, what the hell, what's happened? Why do I need to do that? So this is something that you have to bear in mind. And this also, I think this is the beginning of the more broad adoption of this library. So it's also not clear best practices. And here it's also not clear for me if I'm doing this good or not good in these terms of maybe something can be improved, and I believe that for sure it can be improved. But yeah, this is something a little bit gray area. I hope that we go some time to some conclusions how to do stuff in the best way or the better way, or with the more at least consequences. And this is also the side project, so it's not production ready code. I have to say, it's my side project that I did after hours, and I'm presenting to you guys. And yeah, I think that's all from my side. Thank you.